Hello everyone, welcome to the dataset creation section. First of all, what is a dataset? A dataset is just a collection of data. Sounds very simple, but let's say for example, if you're collecting all the Hollywood movie plots from 2005 to whichever year, let's say 2021 or 22, then that collection of data of movie plots is a dataset. And let's say if you want to train a paraphraser, then you need to collect sentence pairs of original sentence and its paraphrased version, and perhaps depending on the model that you're training, you need to collect lots of data, that is maybe 10,000 pairs or 100,000 pairs depending on what you want to do. For example, Google Translate, you might need Google Translate might have used about maybe 5 million pairs or 10 million pairs of sentences that the algorithm is trained on to work perfectly. So essentially, dataset is just collection of data, and depending on your task, you need to collect the type of data that you want or create it. What do I mean by creation is not all datasets are available online. In that case, perhaps you have a teacher or somebody who can dream up sentences and create paraphrased versions of it, or you have a localization expert, a translation expert who will create these translation pairs, etc. So for our use case, we are going to collect all the Hollywood movie plots from 2005 to 2021. Then you can use the plots to do anything like similarity search among plots or visualizing the plots, clustering them. You can do all kinds of things, or you can train a language model that generates new plots. Like I mentioned, the next sentence or next word predictor, you can train something like that. Anyways, so if you take out the manual part of creating data sets, that is maybe there's a translator or some teacher or somebody who's creating these datasets. If you just take out that manual part of creating the dataset, then there are about 3 methods to dataset creation or collection. First thing is web scraping with code. What does that mean? For example, in our use case, we are going to go to the Wikipedia articles and go through all the movie plots, go through their links from 2005 to 21, and go to the Wikipedia article and collect the plot section content, and that essentially is the dataset that we are creating. So web scraping with code, basically you go onto a web page, then you go through all the hyperlinks, etc., that are there, all the web pages or links that are present. Then you scrape all the data and store it in, let's say, a database or a pandas data frame or something like that. So the other thing to note is that the biggest question is web scraping legal? There might be corner cases, but generally speaking, if some data is available in public and you're scraping that and creating your own organized content, that shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now, the scrape data, you might have some commercial implications if you're trying to sell the data or make something commercial out of it. That's a different aspect. Generally speaking, dataset collection from public domain shouldn't be that big of a problem. And what are the advantages with web scraping with code? You can use libraries like Beautiful Soup. That's a Python library to scrape datasets from web pages, and it's best suited for static pages. I mean, that's written in HTML and CSS. When I mean dynamics pages, usually there's a lot of JavaScript and dynamically loaded content. Maybe that's harder to scrape with a library like Beautiful Soup. And it's also inexpensive. You can just run it with your own server and you should be good. So the biggest way is web scraping with code. And let's come to the second method, which is web scraping without code. And why do we need to actually do this? Essentially, if you're trying to scrape data at scale, You cannot go and write code on various HTML elements available, etc. So you can use no code tools like ParseHub, Octoparse, or Scraping Bee, etc. and you can build web scrapers without code. You can point to the elements that you want to collect on a web page. And what are the advantages with it? Basically, it can support dynamically loaded pages because you can give parameters like wait for 10 seconds for JavaScript to load, etc. And the other interesting thing is proxy rotation. Essentially, if you're trying to scrape a website from your own IP, oftentimes you might get blocked if you're just using Beautiful Soup library, etc. Whereas these web scraping tools, they'll have IP rotation so that you can scrape multiple pages from several IPs so that you don't get blocked or rate limited. And the other thing is several advantages like scheduling. You can schedule every day to scrape new web pages or every weekly to scrape new web pages from a given website, etc. And another interesting thing is browser emulation, because if web pages recognize that you're accessing and scraping the data using code, they might not allow it or block it. And oftentimes you need to go through like a headless browser. That means you almost simulate that you're coming through a web browser like Chrome or Mozilla. So all of these parsers, they might have advanced headless browsing techniques and proxy rotation techniques so that you don't get blocked when you're scraping. And third, and another interesting thing is actually generating datasets with GPT-3 like models. For example, if you can just give few examples of paraphraser, original sentence and paraphrased version, and similarly if you have 4 or 5 such pairs, original sentence and paraphrased version, then models like GPT-3 can generate novel sentences and their paraphrased versions as well. And so you can create novel datasets out of the blue. And when it comes to pros and cons, of course, the first method, web scraping with code, is inexpensive, whereas web scraping without code is slightly expensive because you need to pay for the service, because it provides proxy rotation, scheduling, browser emulation, etc. So you might need to pay a little bit for the service that you're using. And when it comes to like using GPT-3 like models, it gets expensive than scraping, because oftentimes you need to create a prompt and it's a text generation model. So you will be billed for the tokens that you have. So what you can do is you can use GPT-3 like model and generate novel datasets, and you can just create a simple Streamlit UI to accept or not the newly generated paraphrase pair, etc. So that you can have some kind of manual filtering before you place it into the database or data frame, pandas data frame, etc. So these are the 3 methods for dataset collection, and we are going to see all these 3 methods. For the third method of generating GPT-3 like datasets with GPT-3 like models, we are not going to create the Streamlit version in this lecture or in this module, but rather in the last module we will see how we can create datasets. But essentially we'll see how the prompts looks like and how we can actually generate datasets. And we are going to see example with ParseHub without code and Beautiful Soup with code. And we are going to collect all our movie plots from Wikipedia using Beautiful Soup library. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next section.